she still comes back, and he's at this point looking pretty hideous. He's vomiting stuff up, and she goes and she's hugging him, and I'm just thinking, girl, get out of there. You have not invested enough in this relationship for this to be at this level.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the show. My name is James, joined as ever by my good friend Steve, and this is one of our Halloween spooktacular episodes. We are talking about The Fly, the 1958 and the 1986 remake.
Hey, but before we talk to The Fly, if you haven't already subscribed to Deep Dive, it'd be a great favor to us. If you went ahead and did that, just tap that subscribe button, ding the little bell, and you'll be informed every time a new video drops. James, I have been wanting to talk about The Fly for our spooktacular, mainly because my earliest childhood horror film was the original Fly. And that film just sat with me, stayed with me for, that the whole help me scene at the end.
Oh, yeah.
As a young I was easily preteen. I probably watched this when I was about 9 or 10 years old. Wow. And it was so haunting to me, the concept of somebody becoming a fly and a little baby with that little head being trapped in a web. Maybe that's why I don't like horror as much as you do, because it sits with me so much. But this movie has been a favorite of mine for years, and that's why I wanted to do it for our spooktacular month.
That's really cool. I mean, I definitely saw the Cronenberg version first, which came out in '86, and I'm not sure when I saw it as an early teenager, I think, and it had a big impact on me. I was getting into film in a real way, and Cronenberg was one of those directors that I kind of hooked my wagon to relatively early on, certainly when it came to sort of genre movies. I didn't see the remake until, I don't want to say recently, but late, definitely. And I'd seen key sequences from it. The reveal when his head is exposed, and the sequence at the end, where he's trapped in the web. But it was probably only maybe 10 years ago, something like that, that I actually sat down and watched the whole thing. And it's great. I mean, it's a very different movie tonally.
Yes.
I think it ties more into the sort of the Mad Professor movies of the sort of classic Universal horror era. I found that there's a real strong sort of Phantom of the Opera vibe to it. He's very much like this sort of tortured genius hiding away in the shadows, like, don't look at me, don't look at me. Whereas the Cronenberg movie, although it's very similar territory, the approach to it is very, very different. I think he had very different preconceptions in the Cronenberg one. It's far more, I mean, he's obviously the body horror. When you say body horror, you think you're talking about Cronenberg, really, and how all his movies are finding disgusting ways to distort the human form, and it's a very visceral reaction that the audience will have. But also, I think it ties in with themes of the day, like the AIDS pandemic was going on, and I think that was a very palpable fear at the time, and sort of the idea that your body was being invaded by something that you didn't know that you had.
Right.
It caused your body to slowly sort of fall to pieces and things like that. So I think it tapped into very sort of social issues. Well, I'm not entirely sure that those things are there in the 58 versions. I mean, someone will probably come now and tell me that it was all this sort of, communist allegory.
Red Scare. It's a Red Scare. It was all about that. No, because I was a big fan of the original Fly when Cronenberg's came out. I remember lining up with my friends, and I saw it at the cinema, and I loved Cronenberg's remake of it. I thought he did a wonderful job. I love both films. I don't know if it was Cronenberg, but somebody made a decision, the writers, when they wrote the script for the remake, that we're not going to have a sudden transformation. It's going to be a metamorphosis. And that whole process changed the whole dynamics of the film, because I remember the first time we saw that and we see him teleport and it's still him. We knew that something was going to be different. They had to do something different from the original, but we weren't sure what it was. And when he was completely human and completely normal, I think we were all sitting there going, what just happened? What's going to happen? And obviously then the big reveal starts to happen.
Right, because you get the impression in the 58 version that he tried it once and it went wrong. It was man meddling with
nature.
with nature in ways that he
Yeah.
shouldn't, and it was sort of the atomic age of science, and it was
Yeah.
it was a sort of a cautionary tale
Yeah.
about technological advancement, I suppose.
Yeah.
And in the Cronenberg version, you see, firstly, it's told in chronological order, which the 58 version isn't. It's all
Right.
told as a confessional flashback, isn't it, from
Mm-hmm.
his wife. Also, you see how it develops. You see how he's doing it, and yeah, you're right. He does it again and again and again and again, before and after the cross contamination, if you like.
Yeah.
And and he keeps doing it. It becomes an addiction. So there's a kind of drug parallel in there as well. But I think the one thing I love about, and this is not to take away from the 58 version, but the one thing I love about the Cronenberg version is it's so lean. It's one of the most kind of efficient scripts in all of cinema, in my opinion. There is not a wasted moment. I mean, literally lights up, act one, scene one. They're already talking to each other at a cocktail reception. There isn't even sort of them meeting. They are there face to face. It's them meeting for the first time, of course.
Yeah.
But there aren't any awkward introductions. They're already talking.
Yeah.
And then it gets immediately, it's like, come to my place. Here's what I'm doing. Bum, 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 bum. And then at the end, she kills him. The end. It's like cut to black, the end. And I really admire that about the movie. Far too many films, I think, are overlong and unnecessary exposition and padded out. Yeah. And this tells you everything that you need to know. It does it in an organic way. You learn about the characters in a way that doesn't feel forced. It doesn't feel like you're being having stuff explained, and it's just bang, 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 and done. Yeah. And you're in and out in like 90 minutes, but that is always a good thing.
Totally agree with you about the efficiency, but I think, do you think because of that efficiency, there's a sacrifice of the character development, the underpinning of this relationship being strong enough for her to keep going back to him, even though he's decomposing? Because it reaches a point where she does, after he kind of wigs out and he's sleeping around and doing all kinds of nasty fly stuff, she still comes back, and he's at this point looking pretty hideous. He's vomiting stuff up, and she goes and she's hugging him, and I'm just thinking, girl, get out of there. You have not invested enough in this relationship for this to be at this level. Whereas in the original film, I mean, they've got obviously set up this whole situation where they have the most loving marriage. They have this beautiful son. This is picturesque. And so there's a justification for her being able to still love him, even though he has this gross monstrosity head on him.
It's a pollutant that invades sort of a nuclear family, if you like, isn't it?
Well, and you kind of raised it earlier too about the social issue in the 1958 version. We joked about it, but there was a lot more of this underpinning of God. There is a nature, there is a universe, there's a God out there who has set certain things in order, and we have disrupted this. We're who flew too close to the sun? Who's
Icarus?
Icarus. We flew too close to the sun, and we have fallen hard back down to earth. And there's this moral message that kind of comes through.
Well, as Jeff Goldblum himself says in Jurassic Park, they worried too much about whether they could to stop and think whether they should do these things. For sure. I think getting back to Geena Davis's character in The Fly, I think the other element of it that you have to remember, which I think gives her or convinces me that she would keep going back even after he turns hideous and unpleasant to be around in various ways, is that she's a journalist. And this all began because she's chasing a story and he becomes her project. She's going to write a book about him and all the rest of it. And also she's so pissed off by her editor / ex-boyfriend that I think there's an element of that where she's just like, you are still more favorable than he is, than my ex, who has a very bizarre name, doesn't he? John Getz' character, Stathis Borans, which is It's like a name out of Star Trek or something.
I was thinking it's Game of Thrones. I think there's a Stathis in Game
Oh,
of Thrones.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
I was wondering if that name's very similar to the. I'm wondering if George R. R. Martin kind of watched, because The Fly would have been something George R. R. Martin watched, and he kind of, I think he co-opted that name.
I mean, I'm just looking at the other names. I mean, there's Seth Brundle
Yeah,
is an odd name as well, and Gina Davis's character, which is she's only I think referred to as Veronica in the thing. Her name is Veronica Quaife, and it's just like what are these names? These names are
yeah,
absolutely ridiculous. But I but the other thing about the Cronenberg one is it's essentially a three-hander. You get very sort of incidental characters, like when he goes out to the bar and he picks that girl up and things like that, but they're not really that impactful. It's basically just those three, that love triangle.
yeah, yeah.
And I suppose the mandrill, the ape that he brings in, and that's it. Whereas the Fly, the old 58 version, does involve a lot more characters, not least his colleagues, Vincent Price's character and all the rest of it. But I think
I think that movie made Vincent Price. I think he was a not as well known commodity before that film, and that role placed him into the genre, the horror thriller genre, which he eventually became famous for.
It's certainly around the same time as he started doing all those Edgar Allan Poe movies with Roger Corman, and that was sort of
the 60s
mainly.
Yeah.
So quite possibly.
Yeah, I was going to say, I think I read where this was his gateway into that genre. This movie kind of had other filmmakers thinking, oh, this is the go-to guy when we're making this kind of movie. Because all those films you just mentioned, the Vincent Price, Edgar Allan Poe films, are the ones I watched on Saturday afternoon growing up. That was the Saturday afternoon, those cheap 60s and 70s horror films. That's what I was honed on.
Oh, for sure. They are great, and they are so synonymous with Vincent Price these days. And it's funny because I think today the movie is sort of perceived as a Vincent Price movie. Really, where he's not the guy.
No.
He's just the shoulder to cry on, if you like. The character that she can come and talk to, Patricia Owens can come and talk to, because. Do you know the James Bond connection with this movie, the 58 version?
I do not know. Yeah.
Well, the guy who plays the Fly is, although credited as Al Hedison,
yes,
is David Hedison, who played Felix Leiter in Live and Let Die and License to Kill. And before Jeffrey Wright, he was the only actor to play Felix Leiter more than once. Because it became kind of a thing in the series where every time Felix Leiter came in, he'd be played by a different actor. And then they brought David Hedison back for License to Kill. So that's cool. Although you don't really get to see him very much. But he's great. And this brings me to, I have one bugbear with the 58 version.
Okay.
If I may. And I hope it doesn't ruin the movie for you. Because that is not my intention.
It's not that James Clavell wrote it, is it?
I was going to mention with that, but it's not that, which is kind of awesome. All right. So essentially, he splices with a fly, and then he battles to find the solution to change himself back. And in order to do that, they need to find the fly that's got his head on it, and then he can splice that hopefully back with the fly's head. Which makes no sense because what it should be is the two creatures should be the other way round. The one speaking to his wife and with the brain of a scientist trying to do all the investigative research would be the fly with his head on it. It would not be the human body. That would be the monster. The human body with the fly head is the non-thinking, completely freaked out insect that would be going on a rampage and all the rest of it. Would not be the one sort of holding up in the basement doing all this stuff. It would be the fly buzzing around going, I need help doing this stuff.
That has already been processed and thought through, and this is the answer to it. I'm giving you the semi-official reasoning. In the same way, he had his human cognizance, even with the fly head, but it was slowly he was becoming more fly. He's less and less control. He's writing his wife, I can't control the insect that's coming out in me. The fly subsequently, even though it had the human head, was still flyy. But by the time he had gotten to the spider web, he had developed speech. He was having the same metamorphosis happening. He was becoming more human-like. At the same time, David Hedison was becoming more fly-like. And so by the time he's trapped, he's actually able to speak. He wasn't able to speak when they're trying to capture the fly with the white head somewhere in the house. He wasn't able to say, hey, I'm over here, help me. It's like only at the end, and he's going, help me, which is still one of the most thrilling, terrifying, I wish they would remake that scene now with all the special effects that we have today, because one of the things that always bothered me is it didn't seem like it was David Hedison's head. It always looked like it was some kind of weird mutated baby. And it would have been really cool is to put David Hedison's head on that fly with the spider. That would have been creepy as hell.
Right. And how the kid never noticed it, because the kid catches the fly and he's looking at it. He's going, oh, it's really weird. It's got this little white dot on it. No, surely from day one, it was a straight swap.
It's got your dad's head.
Right. And why did the fly keep flying off? The fly would have been in the house, buzzing around, going, hello, help me. Rest of the stuff. So, okay, I have heard your explanation. I'm not buying it.
I tried.
But it doesn't spoil the film for me. It's obviously a far more practical matter of they just want an actor with a rubber mask on.
Exactly.
And I love it for it. The one thing I do want to point out is that both films are Canadian, or rather they're set in Canada, or rather they take place in Canada. I think, like in the case of the 58 one, it's set in Montreal, but I'd be surprised if
it's
they
because
shot
the book it's based on, it was set in France, and they moved it to French speaking. Yeah,
that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's in Montreal. So you have those flamboyant names like André de la Ombre and François de la. Yeah. Oh, they're actually brothers. Yeah, that's right. That's right. And then obviously, I'm not sure. I mean, Cronenberg famously shot all his movies in Toronto, in Canada. He's Canadian and always, until relatively recently, shot all his movies in Canada. He just did. But it was often Canada standing in for the USA, or just non-specific. And I think that's the case in The Fly. It's not specified where they are. But if you know that's absolutely Canada. And it's one of those wonderful things about watching movies with Canadian people. They will be the first to tell you when Toronto, and it's normally almost always Toronto, is standing in for another city. And they will always be like, oh yes, that's Toronto. He's Canadian, she's Canadian. It's a joy. It's a joy to watch a movie with a Canadian person for that reason, because they will not shut up about how much of it is Canada. And I think, if you know the city and you're watching a movie like The Fly, particularly that building, the newspaper offices, the publishing house, it's got this fantastic building. I'm not sure what that building actually is, but that's obviously an incredibly recognizable landmark.
A couple of quick points I wanted to make is I love the homage they do in the Cronenberg version to the 58 version, in that both of them, the scientists' lab has the big sliding steel door. Like if you notice, they both.
Yes, right.
And when I rewatched the Cronenberg version this time for this recording, that really stuck out. I thought, because I'd watched them back to back, and I thought, that's what they were doing there. The other thing I wanted to say is I remember years ago there was going to be another remake of The Fly, and I don't know who was doing it. The interviewer asked the person, "Well, what are you going to do in a remake that hasn't been done?" He goes, and the interviewee said, or filmmaker said, "Well, we still haven't seen a fly who actually flew or fly." And I thought, ooh. But I've never seen a remake. Like I keep thinking it's been quite a few years now, and it's such a story to be mined still. And with modern special effects, even jumping up from the 80s. I mean, the 80s had really nice, that tactile feeling that Cronenberg, that gooey, that everything's gooey.
Oh, the practical effects, yeah.
Yes. But I still think now in 2024 and on, we could do something with this film in a way and showing a fly human in a way that we've never seen before. So I'm waiting for the Fly remake #3.
Yeah, I think there's definitely scope for it to go again for
Yeah.
sure. Why? I mean, why not? And the argument, oh, don't touch it, it's perfect, which never holds water for me anyway, because
Yeah.
it's not you're not replacing a movie, you're just remaking a movie.
Except for Casablanca. Don't do it with Casablanca. Everything else, the Casablanca and the Godfather. Casablanca, the Godfather, and Godfather.
Sure. Well, I mean, they're casting right now for Harry Potter, aren't they? So they're going to remake those already. But I think because the Cronenberg one is regarded so highly and is already a remake,
Mhm.
then you can forgive it. The notion of don't remake it is
Yeah.
tossed
Yeah.
out. I think the other thing we haven't touched on at all, and I don't know if you have any strong feelings one way or the other, are the sequels.
Oh, yeah.
Both films have sequels.
Mhm.
The original has 2 sequels that came in quick succession, very cheaply made, both in black and white, which is a shame because the color in the original is gorgeous.
Yes.
The color palette of it's so rich.
Mhm.
It's kind of like too visually lavish for the material almost. It's like
Yeah.
it really pops. But then in the end, they knocked out 2 sequels very quickly, and then there is The Fly 2 in the 80s with Eric Stoltz as essentially
Yes.
the son of their characters from the first movie.
Yeah, and Daphne Zuniga, she was in that. Well, she played the love interest in that. That film, the funny thing is, it got panned really bad, and I don't think it's a great film,
Mm.
but it has some disturbing moments, and the last scene it still sits with me. It's really disturbing, and there's aspects of that film that are worth watching. It's not a bad film to watch. It doesn't hold up to the Cronenberg version, but I didn't think it deserved the panning that it got.
Yeah, it was very harshly dealt with at the time,
Yeah.
and I think there are sort of grungy horror fans out there who are like, oh no, it's got some. It's
Yeah.
definitely got some sort of visceral, gooey stuff to it. I think it holds up its end of the bargain in that regard, if nothing else.
Yeah, yeah. I don't think I want to say I saw one of the sequels of the original film, and it didn't do a whole lot for me. I think one guy gets turned into a half guinea pig or something. I remember he gets guinea pig hands. That's a
Yeah, I think it's the Return
the-
of the Fly and the Curse of the Fly.
yeah.
There was a box set that came out maybe
Yeah.
about 5 years ago, which had all of them in it.
Yeah.
All 5 Fly movies, and I picked that up and I blew through all of them, and particularly those 2 sequels to the first Fly. I watched them. I didn't think very much of them, and I've totally forgotten what they were like. So maybe one day I'll revisit if I'm going to do a whole franchise marathon again. But yeah, I think there's a reason people don't talk about those.
Absolutely. I think just in closing, one of the things we kind of brought up earlier is that James Clavell, this is one of his first screenplays or first real writing assignments, and of note.
I'm not sure what else he put his pen to on screen. I mean, of course, he's being talked about right now quite a lot because his novel of Shogun has just won all the Emmys. But in terms of what he actually wrote, I mean, there's a lot of stuff that To Sir with Love, the Sidney Poitier teacher movie, set in the UK in 1967. He wrote that. The Satan Bug, 633 Squadron. Okay, so maybe at that time he was writing movies.
Okay, good.
But this is credited as his first ever screenplay. So
yeah. Well, James, I think that's going to wrap up our edition of this episode of our Spooktacular series, looking at both the 1958 Fly and the 1986 Cronenberg remake. I think we both enjoyed these films and are worthy installments into our Spooktacular series.
Yeah, I mean, for me, they work because they handle the material differently. Yeah, the Cronenberg movie doesn't feel like it's attempting to rehash what was said and created for the 58 one because it has that sort of different agenda. It goes into the gooey physical horror of it. it also has sort of underlying messages to do with sort of infection, addiction, and what have you. And just the overall tone of it is completely different. And so I think they actually sit side by side very comfortably and complement each other rather well. And they make a great double bill.
Yeah, they take the concept, expand upon it, reimagine it, and that's why I think it's due time for a remake, because I think there's another reimagining that's yet to do.
Indeed.
But that's what James and I think about both editions of The Fly. What say you? Go ahead and drop us in a comment in the comment box below, James.
Yeah, do you feel the same way that we do? Which other kind of horror movies, sci-fi movies, classics like that have been, let's say, just remade effectively in a way that complements and perhaps even expands and improves on the one that came before? Not a sequel, not Aliens, but a remake. Let us know.
Ooh, that you got me thinking now. I got to come up with something.
It's what I do.
Until next episode. Bye.
You're wonderful to see. You ought to be in pictures. Oh, what a hit you would be.